My dad said to me, "You're a complete doormat. Your sister is the one paying our bills." I responded, "What about the money I send you monthly?" He asked, "What money?" My sister froze, and everything exploded. My old man once looked me dead in the eye and said I was a complete pushover, told me to take a look at my sister and how she was the one paying their bills, and I remember answering back that I'd been sending money every single month, only for him to ask me what money he was talking about. And that was the moment my sister gulped like she was choking on air, and everything finally went sideways. I'm Mike. I'm 32 years old, the oldest kid, a Marine since I was 19, the dependable one who sends messages that start with just checking in and end with "I've got it covered." And that's pretty much my whole reputation. I don't drink much at all. I fold my laundry into tight squares. I can't stand unfinished business. And that night we were all sitting around my parents' kitchen table on a Sunday evening with the good dishes out, even though there wasn't a holiday or a reason. My dad stared right through me like I was a dirty window he meant to clean later, tapped the tabletop, and repeated that line about me being a doormat and my sister paying the bills, and I just blinked and said, "Dad, what are you talking about?" He leaned back like he'd landed a clean punch. My mom pulled that tight lemon mouth smile she uses when she's trying not to pick a side, and my sister Lily dropped her eyes to her phone like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. I heard myself ask, way calmer than I felt, "What about the money I send you every month?" And my dad just shrugged and said, "What money?" like it was nothing. The whole room felt like it tipped a few degrees. I looked straight at Lily. She swallowed hard and wouldn't look at me, and my hands went icy even though the oven heat was warming my knuckles. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked like it was just another normal night, and I told her to say it out loud, to just say it. She tucked her hair behind her ear and said, "Mike, this really isn't the time," and I told her it was exactly the time. My dad pointed his fork at me and warned me not to raise my voice in his house, and I shot back that I was asking him to answer me, then repeated his own words, "What money?" because I needed to hear how ridiculous the lie sounded again. My phone buzzed right there on the table with a bank alert, another automatic transfer going through, another little digital breadcrumb showing where my paychecks had gone from half a world away, and I looked at my father and said it again, "What money?" Lily made this quiet clicking sound in her throat and begged me to stop, and that was how it all kicked off. One sentence that landed like a slap and one question that cracked our family wide open. I didn't flip the table or storm out or even stand up. I just sat there staring at the three people who said they loved me and realized they didn't really know me at all. Then I said, "Okay," real quiet, and told them we were going to talk. I grew up in a house where love sounded like chores and maybe later. My dad worked construction until his knee gave out and then bounced from job to job. My mom taught piano lessons in the living room. Lily was the bright one with student council meetings, soft sweaters, and that laugh everyone said could light up a room. And I was the kid fixing the Wi-Fi and taking out the trash before anyone asked. I was the one who didn't rock the boat because somebody had to keep it from tipping. When I was 19, I joined the Marines, and people always say the Corps breaks you down, but for me it did the opposite because it finally made sense. You wake up, you move, you do what you said you'd do, and if you screw up, you own it. No passive-aggressive sighs, no guilt stew, just plain language. On my first deployment, I learned how to breathe through chaos, rotor wash pounding, dust everywhere, radios shouting at once, and I turned 21 eating cold chow in a tent while a guy named Ramirez showed me pictures of his twin kids. We were barely adults carrying grown man gear while the calendar chewed through months without asking permission. Money was simple back then. I sent some home, starting with small stuff like $150 when my mom needed brakes or $300 when property taxes surprised my dad, even though they hit the same date every year. Then it was $500 because Lily didn't want to ask, but her textbooks were insane that semester, and she called me the best big brother, and I saved that voicemail like it came from another planet. After a while, Simple turned into a system. I set up autopay to a joint account my mom opened for emergencies, and didn't even think to ask who else could touch it, which is on me. Then the family group chat started lighting up nonstop. Rents due, heat bill doubled, washer died, and I sent what I could, sometimes half my paycheck, sometimes my entire re-enlistment bonus broken into neat pieces so the bank wouldn't flag it. The alerts became routine. I'd land somewhere, check in with my unit, hit the green send button, and tell myself this is how I keep them safe. This is what a son does. I'll admit some of it was pride. I like saying I've got you. I like being the guy who could erase an ugly number, and it gave me a sense of control in a life that didn't offer much of that. Things shifted when Lily moved back home after college with a remote job that had a fancy 5-word title and no clear salary. And suddenly, instead of being short on gas, it turned into talk about upgrading kitchens and looking at bigger houses. My parents started saying we, like the three of them, were one single creature with a shared Pinterest board. The first time I really felt off balance was on a video call from the barracks when Lily angled the camera just enough to show a brand new marble backsplash and said they'd done it on a budget, while my mom smiled like it was Christmas. Nobody thanked me, and I didn't ask, but later I saw that same backsplash show up on my bank statement as Home Improvement LLC in 3 clean installments that lined up perfectly with the days Lily had texted me cute dog photos. Little things kept stacking up. December meant a better sofa. March meant fixing the roof before the rain. June meant a new laptop because Lily's job depended on it. And meanwhile, my boots had holes I patched with duct tape, and I skipped leave to grab extra pay because everyone told me I was young and could handle it. I kept telling myself it was temporary. My mom said it would change when my dad's knee healed like a miracle was queued up. My dad said it'd be different when he got back on a site, like the phone would ring if he stared hard enough. And Lily promised she'd pay me back someday in a voice that sounded more like a bedtime story than a plan. The tension didn't explode all at once. It just frayed. And the first real tear came at a cousin's barbecue when my uncle joked that my sister was a saint who paid for everything, and everyone nodded along like they'd practiced it. I laughed because the alternative was flipping a table. Lily squeezed my arm and whispered not to cause a scene, and I swallowed the anger and reminded myself that Marines don't lose their bearing in public. The second crack came quietly when my mom sent me a smiling selfie from a day spa with the caption "self-care," and later that same afternoon, she texted asking for help because the electric bill was behind, and I told myself both things could be true, maybe a discount deal or a friend treating her, and I turned the volume down on that warning, feeling in my gut like it was just background static. The third crack hit harder when I came home on leave and took my dad to his favorite diner, and the waitress asked Lily if she wanted to keep the card on file, her card, with my name printed on it from the joint account, and she laughed it off, slipped it back into her wallet, and said casually that one was just for house stuff. House stuff. The waitress didn't react, my dad didn't react, and I felt like I blinked on behalf of the whole table. That night, I tried to be reasonable and said we should sit down and look at the monthly budget together, but my mom snapped that I was being controlling. My dad told me not to bring Marine rules into a family home, and Lily said she was paying for things, then listed them out like evidence: Netflix, the dog's vet bills, her gym membership, so she could help Dad with his exercises. And the way she said it made me feel like I'd accused her of stealing. I backed off because I've learned that sometimes peace feels cheaper than truth, even though truth always charges interest later. By the time we got to that Sunday night at the kitchen table, I'd been sending money for 8 straight years, covering a $2,800 dental bill for my mom, $1,200 to catch up property taxes, a $900 plane ticket so Lily could network in Austin, 3 separate tire emergencies, and one brutal week where I wired $3,500 after my dad texted that the bank was threatening foreclosure while I was walking toward a helicopter, trying not to puke from the adrenaline. So when my father looked at me and said, "What money?" something inside me finally snapped. Because even if he wanted to play pretend, he couldn't erase me. He couldn't erase the transfers, and he couldn't erase the fact that the person he was talking down to was the same one holding their house together with duct tape and direct deposit. "Okay," I said again, my voice steady this time. "Let's talk." "Don't start," my dad warned. But I set my phone on the table anyway, opened my banking app, scrolled slowly, and turned the screen so they could all see those neat green arrows flowing straight out of me and into them. "Rent," I said, tapping one. Then utilities, taxes, roof, laptop, sofa, backsplash, tires, vet, flights, and more rent. My mom crossed her arms and said they never asked me to do all that. And I laughed once and told her they did. They just never used the word ask. They said, "We're short. It's an emergency. You're our son." Lily's eyes were shiny as she said, "I told you I'd pay you back when my bonus hit." And I told her it already had, 3 times, then slid to another screen showing 3 deposits from her company, followed by matching charges from the house card within 24 hours, salon, boutique, weekend cabin. Her mouth opened, closed, and she said that wasn't fair, and I asked what part wasn't. My dad jabbed a finger at me and told me not to accuse my sister, and without raising my voice I said, "Then tell me where the money went." "Bills," my mom said, "because life is expensive," and I agreed and told her I saw the bills and I paid the bills. "Enough," my dad snapped, telling me I was embarrassing myself, and I told him no. I'd been embarrassed for years, embarrassed when he told Uncle Ray that Lily paid for everything, embarrassed when the waitress handed her my card, embarrassed when my bank flagged fraud, because the mortgage company thought the pattern of payments looked suspicious. The silence that followed was heavy enough that even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Lily whispered that she didn't mean it, and I cut her off gently and told her I knew she hadn't meant to lie at first, that it probably started with pride, with her wanting to be the hero and mom and dad wanting a story where they weren't leaning on their son overseas. So she said she covered things, and eventually the story started to feel real and the spending grew to match it. My dad stood up and told me to get out, and I said not yet as I slid a printed spreadsheet across the table, something I put together back on base the week before after the last emergency text, every transfer labeled 8 years of quiet yes. I told them I wasn't a bank, I wasn't a ghost, I was their son, and I was done. My mom's voice went small and sharp as she asked if I was abandoning them, and I told her no, I was setting terms. Terms, my dad sneered, like it was a dirty word, and I told him yes. Boundaries, then pointed to the paper and laid them out. I'd pay for real needs backed by real bills I could see. No more joint card, no more house account, no more auto pay. If they needed help, they'd ask directly. If I could help, I would. If I couldn't, I wouldn't. And if anyone at all, told people that Lily paid for everything, the help stopped for a year with no debate. My dad laughed, short and mean, and asked if I thought I could dictate terms in his house, and I leaned back and told him I could control what I funded, that I'd been doing it quietly for years and was just finally saying it out loud. Lily wiped her eyes and begged me not to make them hate her, and I told her they didn't hate her, they just loved the version of her that cost me money. My dad slammed his hand on the table and told me to get out, and I said okay as I stood, slid my phone into my pocket, and rested my hand on the spreadsheet for one last second. Before leaving, I looked at my sister and told her something she needed to hear, that shame survives in secrets, and I wasn't carrying hers anymore. I walked out and no one followed, and on the porch I felt that sharp mix of grief and relief, the sun too gentle, the air smelling like cut grass and hot asphalt, and I heard Lily start crying while my parents' voices rose together behind the door. I kept moving, and when my truck door shut it made that solid sound that tells your body a chapter just ended. I sat there with my hands on the wheel and breathed the way we're trained to when everything goes sideways. In, out, count it, ground yourself, decide, then move. I moved. I thought the silence afterward would be the hardest part, but it wasn't, because noise rushed in to replace it. The first hour brought 3 missed calls from my mom and voicemails about family and how dare I put them on the spot, and I let them sit unanswered. The second hour brought a text from Lily saying she was sorry and that she panicked, and I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then finally wrote back that we'd figure it out, but it had to be honest. Day 2 came next. A few days later, my dad posted a picture of himself and Lily at the hardware store with a caption calling her his girl and the one who keeps them going, a little performance put on for whoever was watching, and I didn't bite. By day 3, the family group chat went wild. Aunt Linda saying she heard I was cutting them off, my mom saying I was confused, Cousin Jake saying, "Wait, I thought Lily paid for everything," my dad doubling down that she does it all, and I typed 3 words, "Not anymore. Boundaries," then muted the whole thing. After that came the practical mess. I canceled the joint card, listened to a bank rep try to sell me some premium upgrade, said no, and shut the laptop even though my hands were shaking like I'd just come off patrol. I zeroed out the auto pay, and my phone stayed quiet until the first of the month when my mom called at exactly 7:12 in the morning, already mad, and saying the mortgage was due. And I told her to send me the statement because the same rules applied to everyone, and I didn't report to her. She snapped back that if that was how it was then I didn't get her money, and I calmly said okay, and ended the call because I know when a conversation is just a loop. An hour later, she sent the statement and I paid it. Because boundaries aren't punishment, They're more like a fence with a gate and rules about how the gate works. And if you knock the right way and actually belong there, I'll open it. Lily showed up at my apartment with a grocery bag and those wide eyes. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing a sweatshirt I remembered from her senior year, hovering just inside the door while she said she was sorry again. I told her I'd heard that already and asked why she did it. And she sat on the edge of my couch that still smelled like fabric cleaner and told me it started small. That Mom would say not to tell me about the spa because I'd overreact. Dad would say people didn't need to know our business. And then people started telling her how generous she was, and it felt good. Like she could be the good one without doing the hard part. I told her the hard part was my paycheck, and she looked up and said she knew and admitted she didn't think I was keeping track, which made me smile without humor as I told her I was a Marine and keeping track was kind of our thing. She took a breath and said she'd tell people the truth, and I told her I didn't care about press tours. I just wanted the lying to stop, and she nodded and said she'd pay me back, then went quiet because she hadn't thought past that. I handed her an envelope with a copy of the spreadsheet and a sticky note showing a monthly number broken into smaller pieces and told her it wasn't a punishment, it was a plan, 50 a week, skip it and it rolls, pay early and it shrinks, and I'd match whatever she put toward Dad's medical bills until the debt was cleared, and then we'd reassess. She stared at it like it might jump off the page and said I'd actually made her a payment plan, and I told her yeah, turns out I like plans, which made her sniff and laugh at the same time and say thanks. We cooked the groceries she brought, eggs and bread and berries. She insisted on doing the dishes, and she hugged me at the door in a way that felt like we were kids again, trying to say sorry for a broken vase. The next week my mom called saying the power company messed up the bill, and I told her to send it, and she sent a photo of the envelope instead of the statement, so I told her to open it, and 4 hours later she sent the actual bill, which was perfectly on time, and the same amount as always, and I paid it, and she texted thank you with a period like someone had forced her to say it. My dad stayed loud, leaving a voicemail that started with me acting high and mighty and ended with threats about being done with me, then texting a picture of the house asking if I thought I owned it, and I didn't reply. I just called the bank and removed my name from the mortgage entirely, because if I wasn't going to be a silent owner then I might as well be a person with clean hands. Freedom showed up in strange ways. Like a Saturday morning where I made pancakes and didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. A run where I didn't mentally sort which bill I'd pay next. A night sitting on the fire escape with a beer watching the street turn gold without feeling responsible for the weather. It wasn't all smooth, because guilt is a muscle my family trained hard, and when my mom sent a picture of my dad in a brace I felt it tighten. But I breathed, counted, checked the calendar and the statements, and asked myself if it was a real need or just a nudge, helping when it was a need and holding firm when it wasn't, and slowly I learned the difference. Work changed me too, because guys on base who used to call me accountant or dad since I kept everyone squared away started asking how I did it. How you say no without sounding like a jerk, and I told them straight that sometimes you can sound like a jerk, you just can't be one. You state the rule, keep the rule, and be generous inside it. I also did something that felt both dumb and necessary. I opened a new account in my budgeting app labeled Mike Only and moved money there first every payday for rent, food, savings, and even a line for fun that I actually used. I bought a beat-up guitar and learned 4 ugly chords, spent a weekend fixing my truck with parts that weren't from a bargain bin, and took a woman named Sam to a minor league game without spending the whole time bracing for a text that would pull me away. Lily started sending the 50 every Friday, sometimes with a screenshot like she needed a gold star, sometimes late on Sunday with double the amount. And it stopped being about the cash and started being about the habit, her learning to carry her weight, and me learning not to grab it back. 2 months and she posted a photo saying she was learning to tell the truth even when she wanted to be liked. My mom replied with a string of eye-roll emojis. My dad wrote that family business was private, and I didn't touch any of it, because private to them meant hide the shame, and truth to me meant name the mess so you can clean it. The real change showed up at my grandma's birthday dinner, and I almost skipped it, but didn't because I loved her, and because avoiding a battlefield isn't the same thing as peace. And we were all seated when Uncle Ray lifted his glass and started to say, "To Lily, the one who." I stood up right away, calm but firm, and corrected the moment without a smile, saying that for 8 years I'd been the one paying the bills while Lily told people she did, and that story was over because we were all about to learn some new habits. Forks scraped plates. Someone cleared their throat. Lily stared down at her napkin like it might whisper advice. My dad's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before, and my grandma looked at me with those sharp eyes of hers and said I'd finally grown a spine, then laughed with real joy and went back to eating like she'd been waiting a decade for that moment. The whole table seemed to breathe out at once. Conversations shifted. Cousin Jake asked me about my last duty station. Aunt Linda complimented Lily's haircut without mentioning money, and the world didn't collapse. We just stopped lying out loud. After dessert, my dad trapped me near the coat rack and told me I'd humiliated him, and I answered evenly that he'd done that himself by lying long enough to start believing it. He leaned close and accused me of thinking I was better than him, and I thought about all the years I tried to win by shrinking, then told him no, I was just finally being myself, which left him looking confused the way people do when their favorite lever stops working. He told me to get out, and I said I would, adding that when the mortgage came due next month and he needed help, he already knew the rules, and when he didn't respond I took that for what it was, because silence tells you plenty. When I got back to my place, there was an envelope under my door with no return address, just my name in Lily's neat handwriting, and inside was $50 in cash, and a note saying she'd told Grandma the truth too, and Grandma had said it was about time. I put the money in a jar on my dresser, not to keep score, but to remind myself that people can change, including me, and I started changing in small ways that felt like breathing cleaner air. I agreed to volunteer at a local boxing gym showing kids how to wrap their hands and keep their feet under them. I slept deeply, and I made plans that didn't include a backup for a 2 a.m. emergency call, realizing there's a lot of life on the far side of the question what money, including space and a quiet you actually earn. 3 months after the kitchen table blow-up, my dad called, not my mom but him, cleared his throat, and said my mother thought he should talk to me, and I sat in my truck outside the gym with the windows down and the street humming and told him okay. He said the mortgage was due. I told him to send the statement, and after a pause he said, softer than I'd ever heard him, that Lily told him she was paying me back, and I said she was, and that I'd made a plan, which sounded strange coming out of his mouth. He said he hated plans. I told him I knew, and we sat in a new kind of silence, not the old loaded one, but the kind where you test whether a bridge can hold. He admitted he shouldn't have called me a doormat. I agreed, said we couldn't undo it, but we could decide what came next, and after a cough he asked me to send him that budget thing, the spreadsheet. Something inside me loosened, and I told him I'd send a template, and that we could go over it together or he could do it alone, his choice. And when he said my voice sounded different, I told him it was because it was finally mine. He mentioned my mom making chicken, which was his way of saying he missed me, and I said I was busy that night, but could come by Sunday after church for 1 hour to talk bills only, no feelings or history, and he agreed. That Sunday I showed up with printed pages and a highlighter, and we sat at the same table where he'd called me a doormat, except the light felt different, maybe because I was. We mapped the month, mortgage, utilities, his physical therapy, the dog shots, circled wants in orange, wishful thinking in red, listed 3 calls he had to make himself, and 2 I'd make if he wrote down the questions, and the rules stayed simple. Ask, tell the truth, no exceptions. He tried to argue with that last one, and I shook my head and told him that rule was for me. And halfway through Lily walked in and slid another 50 onto the table without a word. My mom hovered, then sat, then asked what APR meant, and I watched my dad stop himself from joking and actually explain it. It was small, but it mattered, and nobody said thank you or hugged it out. Yet I left with fewer numbers on the spreadsheet and a strange lightness in my chest, like I'd finally set down a 100-pound pack I'd forgotten I was carrying. Driving home, the sunset painted pink edges on everything. I rolled the window down. The air smelled like cut grass and exhaust, and I thought about 19-year-old me in a barracks wiring money because love felt like obligation, and 32-year-old me at a kitchen table saying words that changed the room. What I know now is simple. Love without boundaries turns into debt that compounds. Boundaries without love become walls, and the balance is a fence with a gate and a bell, and you're allowed to unplug the bell at night and ask people to knock. I still help my family, just not in the dark. I still love my sister, just not the version of the story where she's the hero funded by my wallet. I still answer my mom's calls sometimes, and I still hear my dad's voice in my head, only now it's quieter than my own. A week after our budgeting meeting, I texted Lily a photo of the jar on my dresser with the uneven stack of 50s like a crooked picket fence and told her it wasn't about payment, but about pattern, and she wrote back that she knew and could feel it too. Last night I sat on the fire escape with that secondhand guitar, my fingers still tripping over a G chord, the city making its usual noise, and beneath it I could hear my own breathing steady and counted. I thought about Sunday dinners, marine chow, the burnt taste of my dad's cheap coffee, and I didn't feel angry or useful or like a doormat or a hero. I just felt like a man standing solidly on his own feet. If there's a moral in all this, it's a plain one. I won't let people use me and call it love. I won't mistake silence for peace, and I won't fund a lie. I'll show up with receipts, with kindness, and with a gate that opens only when the bell rings for the right reasons. And if someone asks what money, I'll say the money I earn and the money I choose, and then I'll choose. That's the whole story.